The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, its walls reflecting the soft blue light that every species in the known galaxy found comfortable. Representatives from 47 different worlds sat in their designated sections, their various forms creating a bizarre tapestry of evolution's creativity. The Zelthrani floated in their environmental bubbles, their tentacles swaying gently in the artificial currents. The crystalline vortex clicked and chimed as they communicated through harmonic frequencies. The massive Goroth delegates, each standing nearly 4 meters tall, occupied reinforced platforms designed to support their rocky, mineral-based bodies dotted the center of this vast assembly. A small delegation sat in what most observers considered the least prestigious section of the chamber. The newcomers were called humans, and they had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their ship designs were crude, their technology primitive, and their social structure seemed chaotic compared to the ordered civilizations that had governed the galaxy for thousands of years. Ambassador Thorn adjusted his simple black uniform and tried not to feel overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the chamber around him. Beside him sat Colonel Martinez, whose weathered face bore the scars of conflicts on a dozen different worlds, and Dr. Chung, whose brilliant mind had helped humanity decode the first alien transmissions that led to this moment. The session was called to address what the Council termed the growing threat of the Dakari swarm. For the past 6 months, this aggressive species had been expanding their territory, consuming entire star systems and enslaving or destroying any civilization in their path. The established powers of the galaxy had tried their usual diplomatic approaches, economic sanctions, and finally limited military responses. Nothing had worked. High Chancellor Zyth, a towering figure from the ancient Alterian Empire, gestured with one of his 4 arms toward a holographic display that materialized in the center of the chamber. The display showed star charts marked with red zones indicating Dakari-controlled space. The red was spreading like a cancer across the galaxy's spiral arms. "The situation continues to deteriorate," Chancellor Zyth's voice resonated through universal translators. "Our most recent engagement at the Tau Ceti system resulted in the loss of 47 ships and the displacement of 12 million civilians. The Dakari tactics remain unpredictable and brutally effective." Ambassador Kellen of the Misharian Federation, whose people had once been considered the finest strategic minds in the galaxy, shook his massive head in frustration. "Their swarming tactics overwhelm our traditional defensive formations. When we concentrate our forces to match their numbers, they strike elsewhere. When we spread our fleets to cover more territory, they punch through with concentrated attacks. It's as if they anticipate our every strategic decision." The Zentarian representative Speaker Vash flickered through several color patterns that indicated deep concern. "Our military academies have produced the same results in every simulation. Against an enemy with such numbers and such aggressive expansion tactics, the mathematical probability of successful defense approaches 0. Unless we can somehow predict their movements or find a weakness in their swarm methodology, we face inevitable conquest." Throughout these discussions, the human delegation had remained silent. This was not unusual. Most council members had barely acknowledged their presence. Humans were newcomers, their military consisting of what the established powers considered primitive projectile weapons and chemical-based propulsion systems. Their largest ships barely qualified as destroyers by galactic standards, and their total fleet numbered fewer than 200 vessels. When High Chancellor Zyth asked if any delegation had additional strategic input, the silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Colonel Martinez stood up. "If I may," he said in heavily accented but clear Standard Galactic. The chamber fell quiet, more from curiosity than respect. Few had heard the human military representative speak before. "You're facing a classic problem," Martinez continued, his voice carrying clearly across the vast space. "Your enemy has numerical superiority and uses swarm tactics. Your response has been to match them in traditional fleet formations and defensive positions." Chancellor Zeth's expression showed barely concealed condescension. "Colonel Martinez, I believe it is. Your species has been spacefaring for less than a century. The strategies we employ have been refined over millennia of galactic warfare. That might be the problem, Martinez replied without any trace of defensiveness. Sometimes fresh eyes see things that experience overlooks. The Altarian Chancellor gestured impatiently. Very well. What does human inexperience suggest we do differently? Martinez moved to the center of the chamber, studying the holographic display. He circled it slowly, examining the red zones and the patterns of expansion. After several minutes, he spoke again. You're fighting them where they're strongest, he said simply. And you're fighting them the way they want to be fought. Explain, came the sharp command from the Misharian ambassador. The Dakari succeed because they force you into reactive positions. They choose where to attack and you respond. They set the terms of engagement and you accept them. In human military terminology, you've given them the initiative, and they're using it to destroy you piece by piece. Dr. Chun rose and moved to stand beside her military colleague. If I may add to the Colonel's observation, she said, we've analyzed the engagement data you've shared with the Council. The Dakari aren't just numerous. They're predictable. This statement caused a stir throughout the chamber. The crystalline Vorthak chimed in harmonics that translated as disbelief. Speaker Vash flickered through color patterns indicating confusion. The massive Goralth delegates rumbled in low frequencies that suggested disagreement. Predictable? Chancellor Zeith's voice carried clear skepticism. They have defeated every tactical response we have attempted. Because you're responding tactically to a strategic problem, Martinez said. You're trying to outfight them when you should be trying to outwit them. Ambassador Thorne decided it was time to reveal why Earth's delegation had requested to address the Council. We're prepared to offer assistance, he said, his voice carrying across the chamber with surprising authority for such a small, new species. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, laughter began to ripple through the assembled representatives. Not malicious laughter, but the kind reserved for children who don't understand adult conversations. The Misharian ambassador's massive frame shook with what his species considered polite amusement. Ambassador Thorne, your offer is ... appreciated, but understand. The combined fleets of 47 civilizations, with technology thousands of years more advanced than yours, have been unable to slow the Dakari advance. What could your small fleet possibly contribute? Victory, Martinez said simply. The laughter stopped abruptly. Chancellor Zeith leaned forward in his ceremonial throne. That is quite a claim, Colonel. You suggest that humanity, with primitive weapons and fewer than 200 ships, can succeed where we have failed? I'm suggesting that sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the best solution, Martinez replied. And sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. Dr. Chun activated a portable display device that projected detailed schematics into the air above their delegation. The images showed ship designs, weapon configurations, and tactical formations that looked startlingly different from anything the galactic powers employed. These are our Wolverine-class strike ships, she explained. They're smaller than your destroyers, less heavily armored than your cruisers, and carry weapons that most of you would consider primitive. But they're designed around principles that your civilizations abandoned long ago. The schematics rotated slowly, showing internal configurations that prioritize speed and maneuverability over heavy armor and massive energy weapons. The weapon systems appeared to be primarily kinetic projectile launchers and explosive missile systems rather than the energy-based armaments standard throughout the galaxy. What principles? Asked Speaker Vash, his color patterns showing genuine curiosity now rather than amusement. Aggression, Colonel Martinez answered. Speed, unpredictability, and the willingness to accept casualties to achieve victory. This last statement sent a wave of shock through the assembled representatives. Most galactic civilizations had evolved beyond what they considered the primitive acceptance of military losses. Their warfare had become sanitized, conducted by automated systems and heavily shielded vessels, designed to minimize personnel casualties. Ambassador Kellen's voice carried a note of horror. Colonel, are you suggesting that humans are willing to sacrifice their people in combat? That level of ... brutality ... disappeared from civilized warfare centuries ago. That's why you're losing, Martinez said bluntly. War isn't civilized. It never has been, and it never will be. The Dakari understand this. They're willing to lose ships and personnel to achieve their objectives. Your civilizations have forgotten that sometimes victory requires sacrifice. The chamber erupted in angry discussion. Representatives argued among themselves in dozens of languages, creating a cacophony that the translation system struggled to process. Some delegates were clearly offended. The Proxima relay station hung in space like a massive silver flower, its 12 arms reaching out toward the jump points that connected the system to the galaxy's major trade routes. Each arm was 3 kilometers long and housed the quantum processing equipment that made faster-than-light travel possible across vast distances. If the Dakari took this station, they would control access to 17 star systems and be able to strike at the heart of galactic civilization. Admiral Sarah Reeves stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Indomitable, watching the tactical displays that showed the defensive fleet forming up around the relay station. 230 ships from 15 different civilizations had answered the call to defend Proxima. The vessels ranged from the massive Alterian dreadnoughts, each over 5 kilometers long, to the sleek Zentarian stealth frigates that seemed to bend light around their hulls and scattered. Throughout this impressive array were 19 human ships that looked like toys by comparison. "Admiral," came the voice of Captain Torres, "from the bridge of the destroyer Relentless, we're receiving deployment orders from the Misharian flagship. They want us to take position in the rear reserve behind the main defensive line." Reeves smiled grimly. Even now, after being given operational command, the alien civilizations couldn't quite bring themselves to trust human tactical judgment. They still saw humanity as the junior partner who should stay safely in the background while the real military powers handled the serious fighting. "Negative, Captain Torres. All human vessels will take positions according to our operational plan. Transmit deployment orders to the Allied fleet." The communication officer at the tactical station looked uncertain. "Ma'am, the alien fleet commanders are requesting clarification. They don't understand why we're positioning our ships in forward attack positions while ordering their heavy units to maintain defensive formations." "Because," Reeves said calmly, "they're thinking like defenders and we're going to fight like hunters." On the main display, the tactical plot showed human ships moving into positions that made no sense according to traditional galactic warfare doctrine. Instead of forming up in the protective formations that had been standard for millennia, the human vessels spread out in what appeared to be random patterns around the relay station's perimeter. Commander Chun, now serving as tactical coordinator, stood at the central planning table surrounded by holographic displays that showed real-time positioning data from all fleet elements. Her fingers danced across the interface, making minute adjustments to the deployment pattern that only she and a few other human officers could see the logic behind. "Ma'am," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving increasingly urgent requests from the Allied fleet commanders. The Alterian admiral is demanding to know why we've ordered his dreadnoughts to maintain position behind the relay station. The Misharians are asking why their battle cruisers aren't being deployed in forward defensive positions." "Tell them," Reeves replied without taking her eyes off the tactical display, "that they'll understand in about 2 hours when the Dakari arrive." The wait was the hardest part. Human crews had trained for this moment for months, running countless simulations based on Dakari attack patterns and galactic fleet capabilities. They knew their ships, they knew their weapons, and most importantly, they knew their enemy in a way that no other species had bothered to learn. The Dakari weren't just another aggressive civilization. They were predators in the truest sense, evolved from pack hunters on a world where only the strongest and most vicious survived. Their entire society was built around the concept of the hunt, and they approached warfare the same way their ancestors had approached hunting the massive herd beasts of their homeworld. What the galactic civilizations had failed to understand was that the Dakari weren't trying to conquer territory in any traditional sense. They were trying to prove their dominance by destroying anyone who challenged them. This meant that every engagement became a test of will as much as a contest of military capability. "Contact," announced Lieutenant Martinez from the sensor station. Multiple jump signatures detected at the system perimeter. Configuration matches Dakari swarm patterns. The main display shifted to show the incoming enemy fleet. It was massive, over 600 ships of various sizes, from small fighters to capital ships that rivaled the largest vessels in the defensive fleet. But what made the sight truly terrifying was the way they moved. The Dakari fleet didn't advance in the orderly formations that characterize civilized warfare. Instead, they swarmed forward like a cloud of angry insects. Their movements seemingly chaotic, but somehow coordinated on a level that no galactic military academy had been able to analyze successfully. "All ships report ready," Commander Chun announced. "Allied fleet commanders are requesting permission to engage at maximum range." "Denied," Admiral Reeves said firmly. "All ships will maintain position and hold fire until my direct order." This decision sent a wave of alarm through the Allied fleet. The standard galactic doctrine was to engage enemy forces at the longest possible range, using energy weapons and guided missiles to inflict damage before the enemy could close to effective combat distance. Allowing the Dakari to approach unopposed seemed like military suicide. The Dakari swarm continued its advance, accelerating as it approached the relay station. Their ships began spreading out in attack formation, preparing to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers and aggressive tactics. They had used this approach successfully in dozens of previous engagements, and they saw no reason to change a winning strategy. "Range to target, 4 million kilometers in closing," reported the sensor officer. "Allied fleet commanders are reporting weapons lock and requesting permission to engage." "Hold position," Reeves commanded. 3 million kilometers. The Zentarian stealth frigates are requesting permission to launch surprise attacks on the enemy flanks. All ships maintain position. 2 million kilometers. "Admiral, the Alterian flagship is powering up their main guns. They're preparing to engage with or without orders." Admiral Reeves touched her communication console. "This is Admiral Reeves to all fleet commanders. Any ship that fires without my direct authorization will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. We fight this battle according to human tactical doctrine, or we don't fight it at all." The threat was clear and unprecedented. Never in galactic history had one species threatened to fire on Allied ships during a joint operation. But something in the human, Admiral's voice convinced the alien commanders that she was entirely serious. The Dakari swarm continued its approach, now close enough that individual ship types could be identified. Their formations began shifting into attack patterns that had proven devastatingly effective against traditional galactic fleets. The lead elements accelerated ahead of the main force, preparing to punch through the defensive line and create gaps that the following waves could exploit. 1 million kilometers, the sensor officer announced. "Enemy fleet is beginning final attack approach." Admiral Reeves studied the tactical display one final time, confirming that every element of her plan was in position. The alien fleet commanders couldn't see it yet, but the Dakari were flying directly into the most sophisticated tactical trap in military history. "All ships," she said calmly into her communication system, "execute Operation Thunderstrike." Authorization Reeves Alpha 7. What happened next redefined galactic warfare forever, the 19 human ships that had been scattered in seemingly random positions around the relay station suddenly revealed the deadly logic behind their placement. Each vessel had been positioned not to defend a specific area, but to create overlapping fields of fire that could channel the Dakari attack into predetermined kill zones. The human ships opened fire with weapons that the galactic powers had dismissed as primitive. Kinetic projectiles launched from magnetic accelerators tore through Dakari formations at velocities that made them impossible to intercept. Nuclear-tipped missiles, considered crude by galactic standards, detonated in carefully calculated patterns that disrupted enemy formations and forced surviving ships into even more concentrated groupings. But the real shock came when the human ships didn't maintain their positions like every other galactic military doctrine demanded. Instead, they moved fast. Human destroyers and cruisers accelerated at rates that should have been impossible for ships of their size, diving directly into the Dakari formations with aggressive maneuvers that no sane military commander would attempt. They fired at point-blank range, using their superior maneuverability to stay inside the turning radius of larger enemy vessels, while their kinetic weapons punched through armor that energy beams had barely scratched. "Impossible," whispered the Altarian admiral over the communication channel. "Those ships are maneuvering at 12 gravities. Their crews should be dead." What the alien observers didn't understand was that human ships had been designed around the principle that their crews could withstand punishment that would kill members of any other species. Years of genetic adaptation to high-gravity worlds and military training that pushed the human body to its absolute limits had created soldiers who could function effectively under acceleration that would render most galactic species unconscious. 3 months after the Battle of Proxima, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different. The human delegation no longer sat in the insignificant rear section reserved for minor species. Instead, they occupied a place of honor directly adjacent to the High Chancellor's platform, in seats that had been specially constructed to accommodate their unique physiology and tactical requirements. Admiral Reeves, now wearing the insignia of Supreme Military Coordinator for Galactic Defense, stood before the assembled representatives as she delivered her monthly strategic assessment. The transformation in how the other species regarded humanity was evident in every gesture and expression around the vast chamber. "The Dakari threat has been completely neutralized," she reported, her voice carrying clearly through translation systems that every species now ensured were perfectly calibrated to human speech patterns. "Our pursuit fleets have eliminated the remaining swarm elements in the outer spiral, and captured vessels have provided intelligence on 17 other aggressive species that were planning similar expansion campaigns." High Chancellor Zeith, who 3 months earlier had barely concealed his condescension toward human military capabilities, now listened with the attention of a student learning from a master. "Admiral Reeves, what is the status of the military integration program?" "Proceeding ahead of schedule," Reeves replied, activating a holographic display that showed training facilities across dozens of worlds. 43 species have requested human military advisors to restructure their defense forces according to human tactical doctrine. The Mytharian Federation has completely reorganized their fleet command structure, and the Altarian Empire has begun retrofitting their dreadnoughts with human-designed weapon systems. The changes were remarkable. Species that had considered themselves the pinnacle of military evolution were now eagerly adopting human approaches to warfare. The sleek, sophisticated vessels that had dominated galactic space lanes for millennia were being modified with crude-looking but devastatingly effective human weapons. Military academies that had taught the same strategic principles for thousands of years were rewriting their curricula based on human tactical manuals. Ambassador Thorne, now holding the title of Secretary of Interspecies Military Cooperation, addressed the economic implications. "The technology transfer agreements are exceeding all projections. Human defensive systems and weapons technology are being implemented across 67 star systems. In exchange, we're receiving access to galactic manufacturing capabilities, advanced material science, and faster-than-light communication technologies that will accelerate human development by centuries." But the most significant change wasn't technological or political. It was psychological. Dr. Chun, who now directed the Institute for Galactic Military Studies, had spent months analyzing the cultural impact of humanity's military demonstration. Her research revealed something that surprised even the humans themselves. Their victory at Proxima had fundamentally altered how every species in the galaxy understood the nature of warfare itself. "Before Proxima," she explained to the assembled council, galactic warfare was seen as a contest of technologies and resources. Species with better ships and more advanced weapons were expected to win. The idea that tactical innovation, aggressive leadership, and willingness to accept risk could overcome technological disadvantage was completely foreign to galactic military thinking. Speaker Vash, the Zentarian representative, flickered through color patterns that indicated deep thoughtfulness. Dr. Chung, our own military analysts, have concluded that human tactical doctrine represents not just an improvement over existing methods, but an entirely different philosophy of conflict. You fight wars as if your survival depends on winning them. Because it does, Colonel Martinez replied from his position as Director of Galactic Tactical Training. Every human conflict throughout our history has been fought with the understanding that defeat meant extinction. We never developed the luxury of civilized warfare because we never had the option of acceptable losses. This revelation had profound implications that rippled through every aspect of galactic society. Species that had grown comfortable with limited, controlled conflicts suddenly realized they were sharing space with a civilization that approached every potential threat as a fight to the death. The psychological impact was enormous. The mere knowledge that humans were present in the galaxy had caused several aggressive species to abandon expansion plans entirely. The hegemony of Krau, which had been preparing to invade 3 neighboring systems, instead sent diplomatic envoys offering trade agreements. The savage clans of Vorthan, notorious for raiding civilian shipping, had voluntarily disbanded their attack fleets and requested protection under human-guaranteed safe passage treaties. High Chancellor Zeith addressed the elephant in the room. Admiral Reeves, there are those among the Council who are concerned about humanity's rapid rise to military prominence. In less than a year, your species has gone from galactic newcomers to the dominant military power. Some fear that humans might eventually use this position to impose their will on other civilizations. Admiral Reeves had been expecting this question. The rapid shift in galactic power dynamics had made some species nervous, and their concerns weren't entirely unreasonable. History was full of examples of powerful military forces eventually turning their capabilities against their former allies. Chancellor, she said carefully, I understand those concerns, but I think they're based on a misunderstanding of human military philosophy. We don't fight wars to conquer territory or subjugate other species. We fight wars to end them. Ambassador. Kellen of the Mysharian Federation leaned forward in his massive chair. Explain this distinction, Admiral. When humans engage in warfare, our goal is always to create conditions where future warfare becomes unnecessary. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to make the galaxy safe enough that military force becomes obsolete. This concept was difficult for many species to understand. Galactic history was filled with examples of military powers that had used their strength to expand their territories and increase their influence. The idea of a species that sought military dominance specifically to end the need for military dominance seemed contradictory. Dr. Cheen provided the theoretical framework. Human evolutionary history created a species that views conflict as inherently wasteful. We fight aggressively when threatened, but we prefer cooperation when possible. Our rapid technological development occurred specifically because we learned to redirect competitive energies toward beneficial goals rather than destructive ones. The proof of this philosophy was already becoming evident across the galaxy. Human-protected trade routes had become the safest and most profitable in galactic space. Systems under human defensive umbrellas were experiencing unprecedented economic growth as resources previously dedicated to military preparedness were redirected toward development and research. More importantly, the mere existence of human military capability was creating a stabilizing effect throughout the galaxy. Potential aggressors were reconsidering their plans, while peaceful civilizations were forming cooperative alliances under human protection. Commander Torres, now serving as Director of Fleet Operations, presented the strategic situation. We currently have defense agreements with 31 species and mutual assistance pacts with 47 others. Human rapid response fleets have prevented 6 potential conflicts through deterrent deployment. And our intelligence networks have identified and neutralized 12 planned aggressive operations before they could begin. The numbers told a remarkable story. Galactic military spending had decreased by 40% in the 3 months since Proxima, while trade volume had increased by nearly 60%. Systems that had been locked in territorial disputes for decades were negotiating peaceful settlements under human mediation. But perhaps the most significant development was the emergence of a new galactic military, doctrine based entirely on human principles. The concept of aggressive defense, the idea that the best way to maintain peace was to make the cost of aggression prohibitively high, was being adopted by species across the galaxy. High Chancellor Zyth stood to address the full council. It has been proposed that we formally recognize humanity's unique position in galactic military affairs. The proposal before us would establish the Human Defense Coordination Authority as the primary military organization responsible for galactic security, with Admiral Reeves serving as Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense Forces. The vote was unanimous. As the formal ceremony concluded and representatives began filing out of the chamber, many paused to speak with members of the human delegation. The conversations were respectful, often deferential, and tinged with something that hadn't existed 3 months earlier: genuine admiration. Admiral Reeves found herself in conversation with Ambassador Kellen, whose massive frame dwarfed even her impressive height. "Admiral," he said in his carefully modulated voice, "my people have a saying, the strongest warrior is the one who never needs to fight." We believed this referred to the wisdom of avoiding conflict through superior technology and defensive capability. "And now?" Reeves asked. "Now we understand that true strength comes from being so formidable that no essay